My name is Isla Monroe, and on the day I was erased from my family's will, I was 28 years old and standing in a conference room full of men who wore my last name like a shield, but none of them knew what it cost me. I should have felt something when the lawyer slid the beige envelope across the mahogany table. Grief? Maybe. Anger. But all I felt was cold. Maybe because I'd already sensed it, the way the air had shifted in the weeks leading up to that day. The unanswered calls, my father's eyes not quite meeting mine, the whispered conversations between my two brothers silenced when I entered the room. I'd seen the betrayal in glances and the decision in avoidance, but still nothing prepares you for hearing the words aloud. Isla Monroe will no longer be a beneficiary of the Monroe Holdings estate or a stakeholder in Monroe Ventures, no longer, as if I had been once fully. As if I had been part of the empire I helped hold up while my brothers played golf and cashed in on shares they never earned. That morning, I had pulled my dark curls into a low bun, put on my navy silk blouse, the one that always made me feel powerful, and walked into that room believing that maybe I was wrong. That the girl who once fell asleep in the company archive room while her father ran board meetings would still matter. That the years of late nights, grant proposals, and field expansions would count for something. But now I was just Isla, the one without a seat at the table. I think the thing that broke me most wasn't losing the inheritance. It wasn't even the company itself, though, that was a wound that would take time to name. It was hearing my brother Chase say, "It's nothing personal, Isla. Just business," while adjusting his tie like he was doing me a favor. Nothing personal. Right. Let me tell you something about betrayal. It never walks in alone. It brings silence, doubt, shame, and if you're not careful, it brings surrender. But I didn't surrender. Not that day. Not even after the door closed behind me and I stood in the hallway of the law office with the world still spinning like it didn't just implode. I walked away with nothing in my name, but I still had my name. And I was going to make them remember exactly what the name Isla Monroe meant. If you'd asked me 10 years ago what I wanted most in the world, I would have said without hesitation to be my father's right hand. Not the heir to Monroe Ventures, not a trust fund baby, not even the CEO. I just wanted to stand next to the man who built something from dust and ambition and know he trusted me to help carry it. My father, Richard Monroe, was a legend in manufacturing. He started Monroe Ventures in a rented garage in Birmingham when he was 22 with a second-hand lathe and 3 college dropouts who believed in him. By the time I was born, he'd already landed government contracts and international clients. Monroe Ventures specialized in industrial materials, composite polymers, high-pressure valves, aerospace components. Not flashy, not fun, but solid, lucrative, quietly powerful. We weren't a hug at the dinner table kind of family. Feelings were awkward things. But I was always close to my father in the way that mattered to him results. He was a builder, a planner. If you wanted his respect, you brought plans and persistence. I was good at both. My brothers Chase and Nathan weren't interested in either. Chase, the oldest by 6 years, had a head for finance, but not the stomach for risk. Nathan was the baby reckless and charismatic, always managing to fail upward thanks to his charm and Dad's bailouts. Neither of them had ever spent a full week inside the plant. Neither knew what a CAD schematic looked like. But they were Monroes, so they were groomed. I was different, not just because I was the only girl, but because I fought for every inch. I went to MIT on a dual-degree track mechanical engineering and operations strategy and came home with honors internships and a vision. I didn't ask to be handed anything. I asked to earn it. My father admired that. At least I thought he did. I shadowed him in every meeting he let me into. I traveled to supplier sites in Taiwan and Singapore, negotiated contracts, restructured entire divisions. By 26, I was VP of Production Strategy. By 27, I was managing a $40 million expansion initiative that turned out to be our most profitable pivot in a decade. And still, it wasn't enough. The shift came quietly. My father had been diagnosed with Parkinson's a year before the will meeting. He didn't tell anyone for months, not even me. When he did, he looked at me with this haunted softness I'd never seen before and said, "I don't know how much time I have to think clearly. So I have to start choosing." I thought he meant me. I thought I was the choice. But somewhere in that fog of illness, of vulnerability, of pressure, something happened. My mother, Ellen, had always favored the boys, especially Chase. She saw business as brutal and femininity as something to be preserved. When I turned down an offer to work at a Fortune 500 and came back to work with my dad, she told me I was wasting my life. "You won't win," she warned. "This isn't a space built for girls, Ela. Your brothers will inherit it no matter how hard you work." I refused to believe her. I refused to believe that the woman who taught me how to walk with dignity and argue with logic could also believe I didn't belong at the helm of the company that bore our name. And then, the signs became harder to ignore. Chase started sitting in on meetings he had no business being in. Nathan got a temporary title that magically turned permanent. Emails went unanswered. Deals I initiated were quietly reassigned. And Dad, once my fiercest champion, began disappearing behind a wall of "we'll talk later." When I confronted him one night after dinner, after Mom had gone upstairs after the whiskey had taken the edge off his guarded face, he just looked at me with tired eyes. "It's not personal, Isla. It's legacy. Legacy." That word, heavy grand, wrapped in false nobility, felt like acid in my throat. I was legacy. I was the legacy. I'd given up the world for it. But somehow they'd rewritten the story to exclude me. So by the time I sat in that conference room, my name no longer on the documents my claim erased, I had already started grieving. I just didn't know the depth of the loss yet. I didn't know how far they'd go, or how far I'd have to go to get it all back. And I would get it back, not out of revenge, but because I knew something they didn't. Monroe Ventures needed me. It always had. And I was going to make them see it, even if I had to burn everything they built to the ground and rebuild it brick by brick. The first time I realized they had been planning this for longer than I thought, I was standing in my old office, except it wasn't mine anymore. The new nameplate on the door said Nathan Monroe, Strategic Innovation Lead. Strategic Innovation. Nathan couldn't even spell logistics until a year ago. It had been 2 weeks since the will meeting. I hadn't been back to Monroe HQ since then, not because I was scared, but because I needed time to understand what had happened, to gather myself, to mourn. But grief, I was learning, could wait. Betrayal was too loud. So I walked through those familiar glass doors, nodding at the receptionist who used to bring me green tea during long nights of quarterly audits, and headed toward the floor that once felt like home. Everything had changed. The first thing I noticed was how people looked at me, cautious, hesitant, like I had become a ghost who hadn't gotten the memo. The second was that my access badge didn't work anymore. It was Chase who came to meet me in the lobby. He looked polished as ever in one of those overpriced suits he wore to feel important, but there was a twitch in his jaw he hadn't expected me to show up. "Isla," he said, voice dipped in faux surprise. "Didn't think we'd see you again so soon." "I didn't think you'd be the type to change the locks on your sister." He gave me a tight-lipped smile. "It's standard protocol." I was the protocol, I snapped. "For 8 years. He gestured toward a side office. "Let's talk privately." That's when I saw it. My office, my files, my project boards, the artifact wall I'd built over years of travels and product launches gone. Whitewashed. My legacy erased in dry erase marker. And Nathan sitting at my desk, feet propped up texting. Chase noticed my stare and gently shut the door behind us. "We didn't do this to hurt you," he said. "Dad's been under pressure. There were concerns about stability and future direction." "Stability?" I laughed coldly. "You mean Dad's condition?" He flinched. "They were using his illness as a cover." "This wasn't just about Dad," I continued. "You and Nathan, you've been orchestrating this for months. We're protecting what he built, Isla. You're emotional, you're say it." He looked away. "You're a woman," I said. "Just admit it. That's what this is. You think I'm too much or not enough, too passionate, not ruthless enough, too emotional to lead a company I practically rebuilt from the inside out." He sighed. "It's more complicated than that." No, it wasn't. I walked out without another word. But as I passed Nathan's office, I caught something on the whiteboard, a list of divisions and dates. My expansion plan, my pilot project in the Midwest, the one I designed and implemented. Except now it was being rebranded under Nathan's leadership. They weren't just cutting me out, they were rewriting history. The days that followed blurred together shock pain, disbelief. Then something deeper, something darker. It was like I was watching my life get painted over in real time. People I mentored avoided me at the coffee shop. Messages went unanswered. I even heard rumors, subtle ones, fed quietly through investor circles that I had stepped away, that I had left voluntarily, that I was pursuing other opportunities. The story was being spun faster than I could keep up. One night I opened my laptop out of habit and stared at my empty inbox. The corporate account had been deactivated, my entire work history deleted, as if I had never been there. I threw the laptop across the room. And then I wept, not the soft cinematic kind, the kind that splits you open. Because when you build your identity around being needed, around being indispensable, and they still walk away without hesitation, it breaks something fundamental. It tells you, you were never safe here. I stayed like that for hours, on the floor, in the silence, remembering the little girl who used to climb into her dad's truck to visit the factory on weekends, the teenager who turned down scholarships to stay close, the woman who sat at the table and dared to believe she belonged. That night, I realized they weren't just rejecting me. They were trying to erase me. And something in me snapped. If they wanted a world where Isla Monroe didn't exist, fine. I'd build one where she did. Louder, bolder, and 10 times more powerful than the empire they stole. The first time I met Naomi Lee, I was sitting in the back of a startup conference in Atlanta trying not to cry into a complimentary protein bar. It had been almost a month since the will. I was trying to keep it together, trying to keep moving, because once you stop, you drown. I hadn't told anyone outside the family what had happened. Not yet. Pride has a funny way of silencing you. I had walked into that conference thinking maybe I could find something to distract me, a startup to advise a founder looking for a COO. I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew I couldn't keep sitting in that same apartment with a glass of wine and a playlist that sounded like heartbreak. Naomi took the stage like a Firestorm black boots shaved sides blazer over a vintage Bowie t-shirt. She was pitching her second biotech company and absolutely lighting the room on fire. She wasn't just confident, she was unapologetic. After her talk, I found her alone by the snack table. She was ripping open a bag of almonds with her teeth, and it made me laugh before I could stop myself. She looked up, grinned. "You laugh like you know something I don't." "I know that almond bags weren't meant to be torn like contracts," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds personal." I don't know why I said it. I hadn't told anyone, not my old colleagues, not my friends from MIT, but something about her made me feel like I could. "They took me off the company," Will, I said suddenly. "My family. The company I helped build. They erased me." She didn't flinch, didn't ask if I was okay. She just nodded slowly and said, "Then it sounds like they gave you your freedom." I looked at her like she'd grown another head. "My freedom." Naomi shrugged. "Sometimes the only thing standing between you and what you're meant to build is the lie you were told about loyalty." Those words stayed with me, even after I left. Even after I went home and curled up on the couch like grief had weight, that sentence wouldn't leave me alone. The lie I was told about loyalty. Because I had been loyal to my father, to my brothers, to a name that apparently never meant as much to them as it did to me. And what had that loyalty gotten me erased? I started pacing. The walls of my apartment felt smaller than usual. I pulled open my laptop and logged into a private server I hadn't touched in over a year. It was a side project I had abandoned when Dad asked me to take over the Midwest expansion. It was wild, disruptive, risky. It was everything Monroe Ventures never dared to be. It was called Architect, a modular smart manufacturing system designed to disrupt small-scale production with AI-driven customization. I had built the bones of it during grad school and refined it during my corporate years. Monroe Ventures had scoffed at the idea. Too niche, Chase had said. Too unstable, Nathan had parroted. Dad had told me it was a good idea, but not for us. Now looking at the blueprint, I saw it differently. It wasn't just good, it was the future. My future. And suddenly I realized I didn't have to rebuild Monroe Ventures. I could build something new, Not out of revenge, but from truth. Because here's the truth, my brothers never saw me as an equal. My parents never saw me as the future. They saw me as a support beam, a helper, the clever daughter who would keep the gears running while the men put on suits and collected the applause. But I knew more than they did. I had always known more than they did. So I started sketching again, planning. And for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I was going to create. That clarity didn't last long. A week later, I ran into Dad at a gala for Birmingham business leaders. It was the first time I'd seen him since the will. He looked smaller, thinner. His hand shook when he reached for his wine. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I was invited," I replied. He sighed. "This isn't your world anymore, Isla. Please don't make a scene." I stared at him. My own father. The man who used to tell me I had a brain sharper than most of his VPs, who used to leave notes in my lunchbox with math puzzles and say, "Show me how you solve this." Now he was just tired. Or maybe he had always been this man and I had refused to see it. I said nothing and walked away. Later that night, I saw Chase laughing with an investor who used to mentor me. I saw Nathan flirt with the head of procurement for a major tech firm whose partnership I had secured. They were standing on the bones of my work and celebrating like they built it themselves. It took everything in me not to scream. But I didn't. I left quietly, went home, and started writing a business plan. By dawn, Architect had a roadmap. Naomi would be my CTO. I sent her a message that said, "Let's make them wish they hadn't bet against us." She wrote back already packed, "Let's light it up." It was time. They took my name off the will. Now I was going to make them wish they hadn't. And when I was done, they wouldn't just know my name. They'd never forget it. They say grief isn't linear. But no one tells you how circular it feels. How you can be halfway into building something new, something real, something promising, and still get yanked back into the place that broke you like gravity. Like a song stuck in your throat. I was deep into building Architect. Naomi and I had secured seed funding through an innovation accelerator in Austin. We were sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen in co-working spaces, and pitching to anyone who would listen. For the first time in months, I was waking up with a purpose that wasn't rooted in revenge, but in vision. Still, I couldn't stop checking the Monroe Ventures homepage. They'd rebranded, a legacy renewed. Under it, a picture of Chase and Nathan standing with my father, whose smile looked thinner than ever. My face gone, my name gone. Even the expansion project I'd created had been renamed Vision West, with Nathan's face front and center. The erasure was almost complete. But that wasn't what broke me. What broke me was the email I received on a Wednesday morning at 6:03 a.m. Subject line, Richard Monroe, update on health. It was from our family lawyer, Marla Dunham. Isla, I hope you're doing well. I'm writing to inform you that your father's condition has taken a turn. He's been admitted for complications related to Parkinson's-induced pneumonia. Chase and Nathan are handling care logistics. They have not requested your presence, but I thought you should be informed given the circumstances. Please don't shoot the messenger. Marla. They hadn't told me. My father was in the hospital, and they hadn't told me. I froze in the middle of Naomi's apartment laptop open coffee going cold. The worst part wasn't even the news. It was that it had come through a lawyer. I drove to the hospital without calling ahead. I didn't care what they wanted. This was my father, too. But when I got there, I was met by a receptionist who said, "I'm sorry, Miss Monroe, but your name isn't listed as a permitted visitor." I laughed, a bitter, joyless thing. "I'm his daughter." She gave me a sympathetic look. "You'll need one of your brothers to authorize you." And just like that, I wasn't family anymore. I sat in the hallway outside the ICU for 2 hours waiting for Chase or Nathan to show up. They didn't. I stared at the linoleum floor, wondering if this was how grief always started, not with a death, but with a door you're not allowed to walk through. I left before the sun set. That night, I called Naomi and told her I needed a break. She didn't ask why. She just said, "I'll hold down the fort. Go do what you need to do." I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly through Birmingham until I found myself on a dead-end road overlooking the steel district. That view factories and smokestacks the orange glow of molten ambition used to inspire me. Now it just looked like a place I'd never belonged. That was the moment I cracked. The tears came slow at first. Then they didn't stop. Not for minutes. Not for hours. I cried for every Sunday dinner where I kept my voice down to be respectful. For every time I pretended I didn't mind being called the backup plan. For every time my father praised me in private but passed me over in public. For every spreadsheet, every 2 a.m. strategy session, every trip I took for the company while the boys partied in Miami. For every time I said this time they'll see me. They never saw me. And my father, my brilliant, driven, complicated father, had chosen silence in the end. There's a special kind of pain in realizing the person you admired most never truly believed in you. Not as a leader, not as a successor, maybe not even as an equal. And there in that broken-down car on that broken-down night, I whispered what I never thought I'd say. Maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't belong in the family business. Maybe I was just a misfit, too emotional, too loud, too female to lead. Maybe I was better off starting over, alone. But even as I thought it, something inside me protested, quietly, fiercely. Because no matter how much I hurt, one thing was still true: I had built something. And they had stolen it. And that mattered, even if they never admitted it, especially if they never admitted it. I dried my eyes, started the car, and drove home in silence. I didn't sleep that night, but I made a decision I would stop waiting for my father to say he was wrong. I would stop hoping for Chase and Nathan to do the right thing. They had taken everything from me. Now I would build something so powerful, so undeniable they wouldn't be able to erase it even if they tried. But first, I had to survive the silence. The morning after I wasn't allowed to see my father, I woke up to a call from Naomi. Investor pulled out, she said flatly. I sat upright in bed. What Jonas? The one from Rivet Capital. Said he's going with a team that has more stability. I knew what that meant. He found out about my family. Probably. Or maybe someone told him. My throat tightened. This wasn't just business now. This was war. I looked at the Architect dashboard on my phone. Without Rivet's bridge funding, our next milestone was in jeopardy: AI testing on our beta manufacturing model. Without that test, our next pitch to Series A investors would fall flat. I couldn't breathe. Don't panic, Naomi said. We still have a shot with Sequoia West, but you need to be in LA tomorrow. I can't, I whispered. My dad's in the hospital. There was a pause. You sure he wants you there? The words stung, even though she wasn't wrong. I got off the phone and stood in front of the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing myself. My eyes were bloodshot, my skin pale. I looked like someone barely holding it together, and I was. Then my phone buzzed. Message from Chase Monroe. Don't come to the funeral. We'll handle the arrangements. I dropped the phone. For a second, the world stopped spinning. The funeral, I hadn't even known he was gone. He had died. And they hadn't told me. Not until it was already over. I sat on the floor, knees to my chest, rocking in silence. It wasn't just grief. It was shame. It was rage. It was the sharp, cold realization that I wasn't just cut out of the company. I had been cut out of the family. Entirely. And I would never get to say goodbye. Not to the man who taught me the first rules of business. Not to the man who used to tuck me in and whisper, "You've got your mother's fire, but my fight." I had spent years trying to prove I was worthy of leading his company, of continuing his legacy. And now he was gone. And so was the chance to ever hear I was wrong, Isla. I sat there for hours, letting the grief roll in, wave after wave. At some point, I realized I was holding one of the old photo albums, the leather-bound kind Dad used to keep in the living room. I must have pulled it out during a moment I didn't even remember. Inside was a photo of us at the Monroe headquarters, groundbreaking me age 13 in a hard hat too big for my head. Dad had his arm around me. I remembered that day. I'd skipped school to go. I had memorized his whole speech and mouthed the words as he gave it. Monroe Ventures stands for legacy, for family, for building what lasts. What a joke. Except something in me wouldn't let go, because no matter what they did, he couldn't take that memory from me. Neither could Chase or Nathan. They could burn every photo, delete every file, replace every product I ever launched, but they couldn't touch what I'd built inside myself. And slowly, that old fire came back, not with a roar, with a whisper, a reminder. I still had a company to build, not Monroe Ventures, mine. Architech wasn't just my backup plan, it was my truth. It was what I would have created all along if I'd been free. And I was free now. That night I booked the first flight to LA. Naomi picked me up at the airport, didn't say a word, just handed me coffee, and drove us straight to the pitch venue. I stood in front of a room of jaded venture capitalists and gave the most honest speech of my life. My name is Isla Monroe. Yes, from that Monroe family. And no, I don't run their company. They made sure of that, but I didn't come here to mourn what was stolen. I came to build what comes next. This, I pointed to the model behind me, is Architech. It's the future of decentralized adaptive manufacturing. It's smart. It's scalable. It's not about legacy. It's about impact. I paused, and the best part, it doesn't need my family's name to survive. Silence. Then applause. Not polite applause. Real. Genuine. When I walked off stage, Naomi squeezed my hand. Win or lose, she said they're gonna remember that. We didn't get a yes that day, but we got 3 callbacks, and 2 weeks later, we closed our next round. Without Chase, without Nathan, without Richard Monroe, just me. And for the first time, that was enough. After we closed our first major round of funding, I sat in a downtown LA diner at 11:43 p.m. with Naomi eating pancakes and crying, not because I was sad, but because I was starting to feel something I hadn't in months. Safe. It wasn't just the money. It was the way the investors had looked at me during the pitch, the way they leaned in, not out of politeness, but interest. For the first time since being cut out of my family's company and life, I wasn't being asked to defend my value. I was being seen. That night I wrote a letter to my father I would never send. Dear Dad, I wish you had believed in me. But maybe the fact that you didn't is the reason I had to believe in myself. You didn't get to see the woman I became. Maybe because you never wanted to, or maybe because you just didn't know how. But I'll tell you this, I'm not just building something better, I'm becoming someone better, and I don't need your approval anymore to do that. Goodbye, Dad. Not to the memory of who you were, but to the version of you that couldn't see me. Love, Isla. 2 months into Architect's beta launch, we had signed partnerships with 4 boutique manufacturers, created a wait list for our AI-driven modular production software, and caught the attention of 2 international sustainability groups interested in our carbon-neutral tech. We moved operations into a real space, still scrappy but ours. Naomi found a warehouse downtown, and we painted the walls ourselves. We'll look back on this and laugh, she said, holding a roller dipped in a shade we dubbed Victory Gray. I smiled, or cry, or both. We worked 16-hour days, ate too much takeout, laughed at our own code bugs, slept on the floor sometimes. And every day I felt more like myself again. More than that, I was growing into someone new, someone who no longer needed to prove anything to people who had already decided she was unworthy. It wasn't until our product demo in Austin that I ran into Nathan again. He was there representing Monroe Ventures at a sustainability summit. I hadn't known they were presenting until I saw the logo on a panel schedule. It took me a minute to decide whether I'd attend. But then I saw the topic family businesses in the age of innovation. I sat in the back. Nathan stood on stage in a navy suit that probably cost more than our server rack, talking about adaptive legacy and multi-generational trust. It was surreal, because I recognized my words in his mouth, my data, my framework. I'd built half the deck he was using during my final year at Monroe. He had repackaged it like it was his brainchild. I walked out before the Q&A. But later that night, as I stood at the Archtech booth, a woman approached me. Middle-aged, warm eyes, firm handshake. I saw your demo earlier. Incredible stuff. Thank you, I said. She nodded toward my logo. Are you the founder? I hesitated just for a second. Yes, I said. I am. I heard your last name earlier. Any relation to the Monroe family? Here it was, the moment I always feared, The moment when people would compare, would judge, would ask, "Then why aren't you with them?" But instead, I smiled. "Yes," I said, "but this is mine, and it's better." She laughed. "Well, I can see that." And just like that, the fear cracked, and something stronger took its place. I didn't need their permission to succeed. I didn't need their name. All this time I had thought I was trying to get back what they stole, trying to restore something broken. But I wasn't. I was replacing it. Replacing a legacy I never truly belonged to with one I had shaped from pain persistence and vision. And it wasn't just about me anymore. Naomi was thriving. She'd just given her first TEDx talk about women in biotech. Our junior engineer Marisol had turned down Google to stay with us because she believed in what we were building. Our first customer, a woman-owned manufacturer in Tulsa who called me crying after her first profitable quarter in years. "You made this possible," she said. No one had ever said that to me at Monroe. We weren't just building a company. We were building something true, and it wasn't waiting for my brothers to validate it. I had given myself what they never would: permission to lead, to build, to rise, even without them, especially without them. 2 weeks after the Austin Summit, a certified envelope arrived at my office. It was from Marla Dunham, our old family lawyer. No cover letter, no explanation, just a manila folder inside with a single note: "You were supposed to have this." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a scanned copy of something I didn't expect to ever see again: my father's original will. Not the revised one, the one they filed after cutting me out. This one was dated 2 years earlier, long before Chase and Nathan had staged their so-called succession intervention. I skimmed it at first: legal language, assets, real estate, stock options. Then I saw it my name: equal distribution of shares among all 3 children, Isla Chase and Nathan Monroe, contingent upon board performance review after 24 months of collaborative leadership. Collaborative leadership. He had included me. I sat down. My knees couldn't hold me anymore. There was a second document inside the folder, handwritten and marked "personal." I recognized the writing immediately. My father's cursive. Sharp. Intentional. Isla. If you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I wanted. I never said this out loud, but I always knew you had more fire than both your brothers combined. You asked the hard questions. You challenged me. You never accepted because I said so as a final answer. I loved that about you, even when it scared me. I was harder on you because I thought that was what you needed to survive in this world. I didn't want to baby you. I didn't want you to have it easy. I wanted you to earn it so that no one could ever say I handed it to you, but I see now that I made a mistake. By trying to make you fight for it, I forgot to tell you I already believed in you. I wanted to step back, let you all lead together. You had the vision. Chase had the numbers. Nathan had the charm, but you had the heart, and that matters more than you know. If the board changes this, if they change you out of it, I want you to know it was never what I intended. You deserve more. You always did. You were always my fighter. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times. By the 4th, I was shaking. This man, this cold, distant man who died without a word to me, had believed in me after all. But too late. He hadn't fought for me. Not when it counted. And the board. The collaborative leadership he'd envisioned had been nothing more than a smokescreen Chase and Nathan used to seize control. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to the Monroe Ventures office and light the building on fire. But I didn't, because by now I had something better than anger. I had power. I had evidence. And I had something Chase and Nathan hadn't counted on. I had earned my seat at the table. So I called Marla. Why now, I asked. I waited, she said, because your father told me not to release it unless I felt you were ready. And you think I'm ready now? She laughed. You were ready the day they took your name off the door. I think you just needed to believe it. That weekend, I took the letter and the will and drove to Birmingham. I stood outside the gates of Monroe Ventures HQ, once my headquarters, holding the proof they never expected me to find. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked to the historical monument outside the one with the founder plaques, and I taped a copy of my father's letter to the bronze statue of him folded neatly under a post-it that simply said, "You were wrong to cut me out. But I was right to keep going." Then I turned around and walked back to my company, to my people, to my future. That night, I shared the letter with Naomi. She cried harder than I did. "You're not doing anything with it," she asked. "Not suing them, not going public." I shook my head. They already lost the only thing that mattered. What's that? The power to stop me. From that day forward, I led differently, not from a place of revenge, but from one of clarity. I knew who I was now, not just someone who'd been left out of a legacy, but someone who had built her own. And every time I stood on a stage or sat across from a skeptical investor or opened our doors to a new hire who'd been told they were too much or not quite a fit, I carried my father's words with me. "You were always my fighter." He wasn't wrong about that. But he never realized I wasn't just fighting to be seen. I was fighting to change the game for everyone who'd been left out, just like me. It had been nearly a year since I'd last walked into the Monroe Ventures building, but when the invitation came, printed in gold and sealed with the Monroe crest, I knew I had to go. Annual Founders Legacy Summit, private invitation only. Attendance requested, Isla Monroe. Requested, not required, not commanded the way it used to be. I stared at the invitation for hours before RSVPing. Naomi sat across from me, arms crossed. "You sure you want to open that door again? I don't," I said. "But I think it's time I stop pretending it's not still there." Truthfully, I didn't know what I expected. Maybe closure, maybe nothing at all. But I did know this: I wasn't walking in there to get something from them. I was walking in to finally leave something behind. The day of the summit, I wore the same slate gray suit I'd pitched in for our Series A, tailored, minimal, and sharp at the shoulders. No Monroe Navy, no family crest, just me. As I stepped into the marble atrium, everything felt smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally. The high ceilings didn't loom the way they used to. The reception desk no longer made my stomach twist. I knew who I was now. A young man with an iPad greeted me. Name I waited a beat. "Isla Monroe." His eyes widened. "Oh, you. Right this way." The summit was in the executive boardroom. Same table I'd once been pushed out of. Same chairs they'd asked me to vacate. But this time, no one could move me. Not legally, not emotionally. I took a seat in the back, not out of submission, but strategy. I wanted to watch, listen, see what they were peddling now. Chase stood at the head of the table, smug as ever, wearing the new brand colors like armor. Nathan leaned against the wall, casual but cold. When Chase spotted me, he blinked. Just once. He hadn't expected me to come. "Welcome, everyone," he said. "Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the presence of, well, a former Monroe leader and part of our family's story." He glanced at me. "I see Isla's still building, whatever that thing is. The thing I said evenly is called Architect. We closed a Series B last month, $36 million, and our valuation just passed yours." You could hear a pin drop. Nathan actually coughed. Chase's jaw tightened, but he kept his plastic smile. "That's great," he said. "Really?" "We're all about innovation." "No, Chase," I said. "You're all about control. Always have been." Murmurs around the table. I stood. "I didn't come here to play nice," I said, "and I didn't come to be invited back. I came because my father's name is still etched on that wall, and no matter how much you tried to rewrite the story, he never erased me." "You did that." "You, Nathan, the board." I looked around the room. Every time a woman builds something on her own, there's someone waiting to ask if she belongs, if she's fit, if she has the temperament. That happened to me here, and maybe I let it define me for a while. My voice didn't shake. "Not this time. But then I stopped trying to reclaim what you stole and started building something you never could. Something you don't understand, because you don't lead from vision. You lead from fear." I turned to go, but then I paused, pulled something from my bag, and placed it in the center of the table. My father's original will. Chase froze. "You changed it," I said quietly, "but not before he wrote this." I didn't bother staying to watch them read it. Their reactions didn't matter anymore. As I walked out, Nathan called after me. "Isla, wait!" I turned. He looked shaken. Not angry, not defensive, just tired. I didn't want it to go that way, he said. I thought we were protecting him, the company. I didn't say anything, because I could see he believed that, and maybe once I might have forgiven him for it. But now I'm not your cautionary tale anymore, I said. I'm your competition. Then I walked away. That night I sat in the Archtech office alone, watching the city lights shimmer below our window. Naomi had left hours ago. Our engineers were out celebrating a new client deal. But I needed the silence. I needed to feel the fullness of the moment, because this was the moment I'd thought would never come. I had confronted the people who made me doubt myself. I had stood in the place they tried to bury me and walked away whole, not for revenge, not to win, but to finally let go. I picked up my phone and sent one text to Naomi. Let's expand, because I wasn't done, not even close. The day the Architect expansion deal closed, we were standing in a former textile mill in Detroit, turning in circles under exposed beams and sunlight that made everything feel golden. This is it, Naomi whispered. She wasn't talking about the building. I nodded. This is the legacy, not the marble boardrooms, not the crest on some oversized door, not the ghost of a father who never said he was proud of me until after he was gone. We were the legacy now. We turned that mill into our second headquarters, hired 45 new engineers, launched a hardware partnership with an all-women fabrication team from Cleveland, signed 3 international distribution deals, and most importantly, we mentored every founder who reminded us of us. The ones who walked in with 2 small shoes and 2 big dreams, the ones who had been cut off, pushed aside, or told to wait their turn. We taught them to take it. I started speaking again, not just at tech conferences, but at high schools, shelters, and community colleges. Sometimes you're not left out because you don't belong, I told them. Sometimes you're left out because they know you'll change everything if you get in. I'd like to say my brothers apologized. They didn't. They sent a stiff email after Forbes featured Architect on the top 10 companies to watch before the IPO. Impressive. We didn't expect this. I didn't reply, because I no longer needed anything from them, not validation, not praise, not permission. I had already taken back what mattered most, my voice, my vision, my name. But healing didn't come all at once. It came in quiet moments, like the first time I walked past the Monroe Ventures building and didn't flinch, or when I watched a 23-year-old founder pitch her startup with the same fire I used to carry in a room full of doubters and win. It came when Naomi and I toasted at midnight on the rooftop of our new HQ with cheap champagne and tear-smudged mascara, whispering, "We did it." The world I'd been pushed out of taught me that leadership looked a certain way: sharp suits, hard decisions, stoic faces. But Architect taught me otherwise. Leadership was also vulnerability. It was building things with people who held your hand when you cried at 3 a.m. over server crashes and failed pilots. It was staying up all night with interns who had no parents, no network, and no idea they were brilliant until you told them. Again and again until they believed it. Leadership was starting over when they erased you. It was loving something into existence even when you were told you had no right to. One night, I found myself alone in my apartment holding the original will and the letter my father wrote. I lit a candle, opened the balcony doors, and read it one last time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply said, "I forgive you." Not because he earned it, but because I no longer wanted to carry the weight of his silence. Then I folded the letter, gently placed it in a wooden box with the first Architect prototype, and closed the lid. They took my name off the will. But I took back something bigger, my power, my story, my future. And in the end, it was never about re-entering the old room. It was about building a new one with wide doors, open arms, and a seat for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. I'm Isla Monroe, founder, daughter, disowned, determined, redefined, and this life I've built is mine.